All right, folks, we are back here on Issues and Answers Friday, straight out of the cannon, with me, Scott Cannon. It is 6:49 in the p.m. on Friday, September the 6th, 2024. The future is here. The future is now. Yes. So what else happened this week? Well, there was actually an indictment that was filed on Wednesday that alleged that a media company linked to 6 different conservative influencers, including well-known personalities Tim Pool, Dave Rubin, and Benny Johnson, were secretly funded by Russian state media employees to churn out English language videos that were often consistent with Kremlin's interest in amplifying U.S. domestic divisions in order to weaken U.S. opposition to Russian interests like its war in Ukraine. So here we go. They're laying the groundwork again for another Russiagate nonsense. So being against our government sending hundreds of billions of dollars to Ukraine makes you a Russian stooge. Almost like how back in the days being against the war in Iraq made you a puppet of Saddam Hussein. You see how this works? This is how the deep state works. This is how the CIA works. This is how the FBI, the NSA, these institutions work. And we know from things like Project Mockingbird that the CIA has people within our media. And this is what they do. They propagandize the public with stories like this, where merely amplifying U.S. domestic divisions in order to weaken U.S. opposition to Russian interests like its war in Ukraine. How is that illegal? How is that illegal to say, hey, everybody, we shouldn't be spending $200 billion fighting Russia when we have people starving here in this country? But it gets worse. In addition to marking the 3rd straight presidential campaign in which the authorities have shown politically charged details about Russia's attempted interference in U.S. politics, the indictment indicates that Moscow may be attempting to capitalize on the skyrocketing popularity of right-wing podcasters, live streamers, and other content creators who have found successful careers on social media in the years since Trump was in office. But why? Why are they gaining in popularity? Could it be because liberals have embraced the war machine, the military-industrial complex, embraced the CIA, embraced the FBI, embraced censorship? No, it could not be that. It couldn't be that. It's all Russia. The U.S. Justice Department doesn't allege any wrongdoing by the influencers. Now let's go back to that. The U.S. Justice Department doesn't allege any wrongdoing by these influencers. Then what is the problem? They said some were given false information about the source of the company's funding. Instead, it accuses 2 employees of RT, which is a really good news channel. If you have a Rumble, you can watch RT, really good. One of the best news channels in the world. A Russian state media company of funneling nearly $10 million to a Tennessee-based content creation company for Russia-friendly content. And again, so what? This is a free country. If I want to say I like Fidel, well, who is the president of Cuba now? I think it's Miguel Diaz. If I want to say I like Miguel Diaz and Cuba, and I like Nicolas Maduro in Venezuela, and I like El Presidente Daniel Ortega in Nicaragua, or I like Xi Jinping in China, or I like Vladimir Putin in Russia, that's my business. It's a free country, folks. It is a free country. You're allowed to oppose American state propaganda. That's what I do every week here on this show. push back against the State Department propaganda that we are constantly fed here in this country that tells us, oh, we're out spreading democracy. Really? Is that why we spent all those years propping up Saudi Arabia that behead people for sorcery, behead people for not believing in God, throw women in prison for wearing pants, and wouldn't let women drive until like a few years ago? Women can't even eat in restaurants with men other than their fathers or their brothers. But yes, we're about spreading democracy. That's why Amnesty International found that we're supporting 70% of the autocratic regimes in the world. But yes, we're about spreading democracy. I digress. U.S. officials have previously warned of Russia's use of unwitting Americans to further influence operations in the 2024 elections, but Wednesday's indictment is the most detailed description of these efforts to date. So this is what they're doing. They are trying to make opposition to America's endless wars and the military-industrial complex illegal. That's essentially what they're doing. If you oppose us sending money to Israel or to Russia, or to Ukraine or to Taiwan or any of America's countless misadventures, it is because you were compromised and therefore must be censored. You must be taken off social media. You must be deplatformed. If you have a job, you must lose it. That is where we're going. We are going back to the blacklist McCarthy days of the 1950s. Where Martin Luther King, where Rosa Parks, where Paul Robeson, where everybody in the civil rights movement was accused of being communist. That's where we're going. People were thrown out of Hollywood. People lost their jobs in media. People were thrown in jail. And to illustrate this, we see this in the black community where the Uhuru Three, who are part of the African People's Socialist Party, have been charged. They were indicted by the U.S. government in April 2023 on the charges of being agents of a foreign government. Now the African People's Socialist Party, led by Omali Yeshitela, these people have been civil rights people for 60 years. The man is 81 years old. He was fighting back in the days with Martin Luther King and Malcolm X and those people. He's so old that he's actually lived long enough to go from being called a socialist and a communist and being called un-American back in the 50s and 60s because he wanted basic civil rights, to now, in the 21st century, in 2024, being called a communist and socialist who hates America and is un-American and should be put in jail because he's against America's military-industrial complex. These are very similar charges to those that were launched against W.E.B. Du Bois. He was also 80 years old when they launched charges against him for criticizing America's foreign policy. The African People's Socialist Party and Uhuru movement has been around for over 50 years. And our government is literally claiming that they need Russia to tell them how to think and how to oppose America's military-industrial complex and racist foreign policy. Good God. But it wouldn't be America if there wasn't a big dose of hypocrisy to go along with all this, because we have found that Israel, America's bosom buddy, targeted more than 120 lawmakers in a disinformation campaign. Israel did. So, this from Politico. At least 128 members of Congress have been targeted by an Israeli-linked operation to spread pro-Israel military content amid the ongoing Gaza genocide. The existence of this influence campaign targeted lawmakers, and it was first made public in March. In it, around 600 fake profiles unleashed more than 2,000 coordinated comments per week backing Israel's military actions, slamming Palestinian rights groups, and dismissing claims of human rights abuses. The New York Times reported that the operation was backed by the Israeli government, citing multiple unnamed Israeli officials, but the exact number of politicians targeted was not previously disclosed. The posts were aimed at the social media accounts of at least 128 lawmakers, including Chuck Schumer, who was the Senate Minority Leader, Jim Clyburn, Ilhan Omar, Shontel Brown, also House Speaker Mike Johnson, House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries, and Senator Raphael Warnock. The size of this list reveals that the influence operators blanketed much of Congress with these campaigns. At the same time, it shows the targeting of certain groups. The names skew heavily towards the House rather than the Senate, and the targets were mostly Democrats. The commenters in the disinformation network posed as Americans and routinely amplified pro-Israel messaging by sharing leaks to fake news outlets. According to the New York Times, Israel's Ministry of Diaspora Affairs spent $2 million on this campaign and hired Israeli political marketing groups to carry it out. So, how much you want to bet that there won't be any charges coming to Israel for its fake news campaign aimed at our politicians? How much you want to bet you won't see any of our politicians, you won't see the president, you won't see anybody going after Israel for ginning up fake news aimed at our political system and undermining our elections? We know now that AIPAC has spent tens of millions of dollars to undermine democracy in America. What calls itself a democracy in America. We know this isn't a democracy, but we know that, and there will be zero consequences, and there will be zero proselytizing from the corporate media or from our corporate politicians. Let's get this caller. Let's get this party started. Hello, caller.
Well, hello.
What's up?
Been listening to you. Great show as usual. What do you think about this? What is it? A Chinese Linda Sun, who was an officer in the administration of Andrew Cuomo, and she was supposed to be a spy. So she had the a Chinese official listening in on a phone call. They said 60 different instances where she was doing stuff, but when they were talking about the pandemic, there was a Chinese official on the phone in the call with the city and state governments or whatever.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. This just came out this week about that. This happens all the time. This happens literally all of the time. Thank you for your call. But yeah, this is exactly the type of stuff you see in this country. And I guarantee you there won't be a huge rigmarole about it. There will be she'll be charged or whatever. but you won't see any big fish in our political system getting charged with anything. You just won't. You know, they have a hard on for Russia. This is what they want. They want to start World War III. And, you know, all I can say is buckle up. We got another call. Hello, caller.
Okay, how you doing, good evening?
What's up, brother?
Look, man. Uncle Sam, we got to understand something. All this chaos that Uncle Sam doing, do you know what Uncle Sam really doing?
What he doing?
He's getting the work. Look, see, Uncle Sam's brilliant, man.
Mm-hmm.
What he's doing, man, he will keep all this chaos going on. He won't do nothing. He'll swear up and down there's nothing wrong. What he's doing, he's got everyone looking at what he's talking about.
Mm-hmm.
But you don't know. Only Uncle Sam and his group knows what really is going on. So the whole world is focused. That's the way Uncle Sam operates. He got the whole world focuses on what he's saying and what he's doing. But you'll never know what nobody will never know what Uncle Sam doing on Uncle Sam. Do you understand what I'm saying to you?
Yeah. I feel you, brother. Thank you for your call. It's always a deflection tactic. Everything that this government does, especially since it's been hijacked by the military-industrial complex. And this is why I'm so adamant. People always get on me about being a third-party voter, especially at the top of the ticket. And this is why. Both of these parties are extremely compromised. They are corrupt. They both serve the military-industrial complex. If you look at what Trump is running on, he's running on continuing the expansion of the war in Gaza, which isn't a war, which is a genocide. And so is Kamala Harris, who, after all this, I'm ceaselessly trying to end the genocide in Gaza, her administration just sent $3 billion over of more aid to Israel so that they can keep doing it. Did you know in 1982, Israel went on a tirade, a killing spree in Lebanon, and Ronald Reagan, who was the president at the time, picked up the phone and told Menachem Begin, he said, cut it out. Cut it out. And in 20 minutes, it was done. Ronald Reagan is now to the left of the Democratic Party. Ronald Reagan, George W. Bush spoke out on the need for a Palestinian homeland and spoke out against Israel's occupation in the West Bank. George W. Bush, the worst president of my lifetime, and in my opinion, personal opinion, him and Reagan, whatever. But we're at a point now where Democrats are more pro-war, more pro-Zionist, more genocidal than the two men I think are most responsible for the most amount of evil done in my lifetime. And that is George W. Bush and especially Ronald Reagan. That is what 40 years of lesser of two evils gets you. You just get more progressively evil to the point where you're pretty indistinguishable from the other guy. And that's what we gotten with the Democratic Party. All right, folks. Let me get off my soapbox for a minute. And let's do some happy happies. We'll be right back after these.